Good evening and welcome to Bloomberg Quint Live. I am Agam Akil. Over the next half an hour, we'll help you catch up with what you missed. Let's get straight to the headlines. The Finance Ministry said the overseas operations of public sector banks will be rationalized as part of the government's efforts to improve synergies and boost cost efficiencies. The interest rate cycle seems to have turned. State Bank of India and Punjab National Bank have raised lending rates. And markets fall for the third day as banks extend sell-off. Fortis Healthcare says lenders like Yes Bank are in talks with 3 to 4 lenders to sell their stake in the company. That's a Bloomberg exclusive. And Mallikarjun Kharge, leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, has declined the government's offer to attend the meeting of the selection committee for the Lokpal appointment. The government today outlined yet another set of norms for its clean banking initiatives for public sector banks. And the latest diktat will see public sector banks prune their international business for greater efficiency. Nikunj Auri joins us on the phone line with the details. Nikunj?
Right. Public sector banks will consolidate 35 overseas operations, keeping in mind that this wouldn't affect their international presence in these particular countries. About 69 operations of these public sector banks would further be examined for rationalizations. These operations would include bank branches, joint ventures, subsidiaries, and remittance centers. Non-viable operations of public sector banks overseas will be closed. Will make it a point that they are cost efficient and to increase synergy. So another important point that the Financial Services Secretary has tweeted that public sector banks would consolidate their equity stake in joint ventures having multiple partners.
Thanks for that, Nikunj. We'll move on. And despite the recent spurt of negative news flow related to the public sector banks, Credit Suisse remains bullish on the country's largest public lender, SBI. But it's not the only underperforming stock that Credit Suisse likes. Saloni Dhanuka gets us all the top calls on that Credit Suisse has in India in this report.
Credit Suisse has come up with a note wherein they have identified top outperformers and relative underperformers in Asia-Pacific region. Well, speaking of Indian stocks, they remain bullish on SBI, Tata Steel, HCL Technologies as well as Sun Pharma, wherein they see an upside potential in the range of 15 to 39%. Well, speaking of stock specific, firstly on SBI, they remain bullish here as they expect retail loan growth to pick up at an annualized rate of 15%. And they also believe that the company has utilized gains from the sale of its insurance arm to improve the asset cover of more than 40%, which will help the company going forward. So moving on to Tata Steel, they believe that the company's plan to restructure their operations in Europe will help the company to de-risk and help them in generating free cash flows and yield synergies going ahead. Well, moving on to HCL Technologies, they remain bullish here as 60% of revenue for HCL Technology comes from infrastructure management and engineering services, and according to the note, this segment is likely to grow faster as compared to its peers. And lastly, on Sun Pharma, they remain bullish here as they believe that patent products of Sun Pharma will generate additional 15% of profits in the next 4 years. Well, speaking about the relative underperformers, according to the note, they remain cautious on 3 stocks, that is Bajaj Finance, Dr. Reddy's as well as Ultratech Cement, wherein they see a downside potential in the range of 15 to 20%. Well, speaking of Bajaj Finance, they remain cautious here on the back of concerns on sustainability of profit as the bank is a growing share of riskier business segments. Well, moving on to the next stock, that is Dr. Reddy's, they are cautious here as they believe that high product concentration will lead to a decline of profits by 15 to 20% in the next 2 years. And lastly, on Ultratech, they remain bearish here as they expect supply pressure to increase in financial year 2019 due to high competition from peers like Murali and Binani Cement.
And Indian equity benchmarks fell for the third day in a row as banking heavyweights extended sell-off. Both indices extended, or rather ended, with cuts of 0.3%. Neeraj Shah is standing by to take us through all the action on the last street. Neeraj, over to you.
It was a flattish week, made flattish actually by the late fall that happened in Thursday as well. But overall ending about 1/3 of a percent lower for the Nifty and the Sensex. The broader markets too, fairly sluggish moves, about 0.5%, actually very, very flat for the small cap indices as well. So let's take stock of what did well, what didn't do well. The top losers included the corporate-facing banks. ICICI Bank, I think they released that data about, or a conversation about their exposure to Gitanjali Group. Axis Bank about 2% lower as well. So corporate-facing banks certainly took it on the chin. Ex-dividend this week for HPCL, and which is why you're seeing this fall net. OMCs didn't do all that badly. BPCL and the others had a fairly interesting week gone by. So no alarm bells really for HPCL individually. What came back on track were the autos. The monthly sales numbers are good, but preempting that or otherwise, Eicher Motors, Tata Motors, Zero Motor Corp, this whole clutch of auto names had a fairly interesting week as well. Ambuja Cements individually came out with the release that the merger with ACC is off for the time being, but that had its impact on the stock. Went down 5% on the day of the announcement, or the day post the announcement. For the week ending about 2.5% to 3% lower did Ambuja Cements. Moving on to the broader end of the spectrum, strong gains for a clutch of names. Astral Poly, it's a fairly expensive stock, but ending about 12% for the week. Orient Cement about 7 or 8%, so that had a fairly interesting week as well. And a clutch of mid caps and small caps did very well too. Look at Forsource at 52-week highs, ending about 2.5% to 3% this week. Godrej Agrovet about 11 or 12% this week as well. So good moves for these names. And Venky's and Zen Technologies were amongst others that did really well. What didn't do well, no surprise guys, Wakrangi continued to go down, another 18% gone, and PNB for a brief period went below the 3-digit mark as well, but ending the week about 11% lower. So not a happy week for these two boys.
Well, thanks for that, Neeraj. Of course, we'll keep tracking cues as we move into trade next week. But coming down to the Indian economy, it's surely seeing a rebound. But Nomura Sonal Verma believes that this is just a cyclical recovery and not a sustainable one. In a conversation with Bloomberg Quint earlier today, Sonal said that while the consumption story is turning soft, what's encouraging is a rise in fixed capital formation. But she goes on to caution that a sustainable capex revival will be seen only once capacity utilization improves. Listen into a slice of that conversation.
Looking forward, more likely than not, we are sort of at the trough in terms of the consumption cycle as well. I think two factors should support consumption going forward. One is, like I mentioned, government policies changing to basically lift rural incomes, which should be positive to an extent going forward. And second, if we do get normal monsoons, that should also be positive, on the rural side. So some of those factors should support consumption going forward.
Wouldn't the capacity utilization on an average be around these 70-75% odd levels? And therefore my question would be, if that is indeed the case according to you, we'll first make that move towards 85%, 95% capacity utilization, before which capex starts to come in. Do you think that's at least 4 quarters away? I mean, my conversations with companies seems to suggest that new capex by private sector, save for maybe a cement company or two, is probably 3 quarters away at least.
I would broadly agree with your assessment, in terms of the timelines. One is on the capacity utilization front. And second, even in terms of the NPA resolution, the timelines that have been given, etc., do suggest that it's going to take at least another year. And therefore, to that extent, more sort of sustainable new investment recovery, picking up might be another year away. Until then, I think what we are basically going to see is sort of a cyclical recovery where, global factors are clearly having some positive effect. The remonetization, just as demonetization led to a big drop, the process of remonetization is going to lead to a big increase, as we are seeing right now, and something that we will see in the next 6 months. And of course, the GST drag sort of also fading away. So I think those are clearly the factors at the margin which are going to be driving recovery in the next few quarters. Beyond that, I think, one thing I do want to highlight is that, 12 months back, it was all gloom and doom. And now it's sort of all boom. We need to clearly have a balance. And I think the balance is that in the last 6 months, we have seen financial conditions tighten. Whatever's going on in the banking sector clearly is going to lead to lending standards tighten even more. The estimates on growth capital post the recapitalization have been brought down. And therefore, the point that, yes, we are seeing a cyclical recovery, but the more sustainable capex-driven recovery, which can sustain multi-year. We do not want another 2-3 quarters of high growth and then that, falling down back again. The more sustainable recovery is probably still some time down the line. Till then, yes, we should enjoy the cyclical recovery.
The interest rate cycle seems to have turned. The country's largest public lender, State Bank of India and Punjab National Bank, have raised lending rates, and the new rates are effective immediately. Vishwanath Nair joins us with details.
Right, Agam. So this announcement came in earlier this morning where State Bank of India had said that it has increased the interest rates by about 10 to 25 basis points on the MCLR across various tenors, especially in the one-year MCLR, which is typically the tenor where the SBI and most other banks link home loans and other important retail loans. That one-year MCLR has been increased by about 20 basis points to 8.15%. Now, why is this important? Is because SBI will then now become part of a league of some other private sector banks also who have increased their interest rates over the last couple of weeks. There was HDFC Bank and Axis Bank who had both announced an increase in their MCLR. But it is important because what SBI does, typically that becomes the industry norm for other public sector banks, which means that in the coming weeks, you will see some of the other public sector lenders coming up with announcements of their own, with increasing their lending rates for their retail lenders. It's important to also note the overall macroeconomic scenario in which this announcement is coming in, because systemic liquidity for the banking system has been in deficit mode for some time now, and currently it is at the levels which was the pre-demonetization levels. Now, if you remember, during demonetization, banks got a lot of deposits under their CASA deposits, which led to a lot of them being flush with funds and them being able to manage their costs better. But now all of that benefit seems to have flown out of the banking system, and now they are seeing the impact of the rising interest rates in the system. So, you will see some of the other public sector lenders coming in with more announcements in the coming week.
Thanks for that, Vishwanath. Moving on, 2018 is turning out to be a good year for automakers, with all players posting double-digit growth in the first 2 months of the year. Yatin Mota standing by with the February monthly sales numbers put out by all companies. Yatin?
Well, if you look at the auto companies, it has been a very strong month of February. In fact, despite the fact that there were, a couple of inauspicious days because of Holocaust, ahead of Holi, we had good wholesales coming in. In fact, if you look at Maruti, they posted a 15% growth ahead of estimates. Sales came in at 1.49 lakh units. Escorts, the tractor sales growth was almost 52%, better than expectations. Bajaj Auto also surprised on the positive side. And probably after a couple of months, we are looking at the domestic market, which is growing better than export market. So total sales were up 31%, wherein the domestic sales was up 35%. Ashok Leyland also good show continues, 29% growth there. Stock at a fresh 52-week high. Sales came in at little over 18,000 units there. Light commercial vehicles sales were up 63% for Ashok Leyland. TVS Motor also came out with numbers right now, so a 37% growth there. And also, if you look at Eicher Motors and the Royal Enfield end of the business and the commercial vehicle end of the business, both posted strong growth. So if you look at the numbers, so far they have come in much better than the street expectations. In fact, if you look at the growth in the two-wheeler space, it has been quite high. Passenger vehicle also, the growth remains quite robust. So a quite healthy month for the automakers this time in Feb 2018.
Thanks for that, Yatin. Meanwhile, India's electric vehicles push is lacking a key stimulant, that's easy and affordable finance loans. And EMIs have driven demand for the most consumer products, from homes to cars and appliances. But lenders are reluctant to fund electric vehicles. Anindya Upadhyaya of Bloomberg News gets us details in this report.
One of the major concerns of lenders to lend to the electric vehicle segment is, what if tomorrow there's a new technological breakthrough and battery prices fall down? And that would mean that the current loans would come under pressure. At least that's what Yes Bank says. And Hero Electric, which is a two-wheeler maker, kind of called this situation as a chicken and egg situation. He said that when there's not enough financing over here, the sales volumes cannot take off, and sales volumes are not taking off, and so lenders are not interested. In fact, he also pointed out that his sister concern, Hero FinCorp, doesn't lend to Hero Electric yet. Mahindra Finance, on the other hand, however, is interested in this segment and wants to set aside some capital as an experiment and to kind of explore this opportunity of electric vehicles. Lithium Urban Technologies, which is a deployer of electric fleets, said that when it started out and when it went to banks to finance its business, it had to educate the banks and had to, who was stonewalling Lithium Urban and were not willing to lend. That situation has not really changed too much. However, there is some push or thought from the government side, we can say, if we look at India's national automotive policy, a draft of the national automotive policy, which the government released about 10 days ago. And it has about a couple of lines saying that banking norms need to be tweaked if green mobility in India has to be pushed.
And Fortis Healthcare is putting up a brave front. The company's CEO Bhavdeep Singh told Bloomberg Quint the Singh brothers have given an assurance to the company that they will return the money taken from Fortis. Darshan Mehta, who spoke to Bhavdeep Singh, gets us the key takeaways from the interaction in this report.
Basically, what they're saying is, they tried to put up a brave face. Obviously, they were giving their defense. The important thing that they said, first of all, was that, despite whatever the auditor said, that the accounts were signed by the audit committee, and that is why, they were able to release the results. So that was the first takeaway. And the company has formed an investigation team to look into the audit team claims. So basically, it was the intercorporate deposits. They're talking about the legal issues that are there. So several of these issues, the legal team will look into the face. Apart from it, they're saying that, the big problem was this 473 crore that was given out to companies which at one point of time were not subsidiaries, but then they become subsidiary. So they're working on a repayment plan, and they say that they believe that, by the end of the first quarter, this money will come in. Even this and, the other money given to the vendors that was there, close to 58 crores. So they are pretty confident that the money will come in back into the company. The next thing that they said that, the Singh brothers had given assurance in terms of a return of the fund. So by the first quarter, they expect money to come in into the company. The other thing and important thing that we need to talk about is the fact that, they are confirming that, they are in talks with a lot of company. Right now, there is no promoter of Fortis. So a lot of companies have shown interest in acquiring Fortis. In an interview to Bloomberg, they had said that 3 to 4 companies have already shown interest. So that is something that, it was important that the management pointed out. In terms of the RHT stake sale, it says it's a good fundamental bet because, the amount of money that they keep giving to RHT in terms of service fees and all, that will come down drastically. And they have the funds to actually, and at this point of time, they are amply liquid enough to actually go in for this acquisition. This, they say, if they do this RHT acquisition, it will make Fortis a much more attractive assets for investors to come in. And even when they're looking for debt or equity partners to fund the RHT stake, they have significant amount of interest that is coming in. So basically, a lot of stuff spoken about the management in terms of what the company has. Nothing much on the numbers as such, but clearly they believe that they will be able to guide Fortis to better days. They believe money will come back. They believe once RHT happens, it will be a much more attractive asset. M&A talk. So it's all across the board. The management spoke to us.
Right, moving on, the Enforcement Directorate has attached 41 properties worth 1,217 crore rupees belonging to Mehul Choksi and companies controlled by him. These properties include 15 flats and 17 office premises in Mumbai and Hyderabad, shopping mall in Kolkata and farmhouse in Alibag, and land in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. The ED has also approached the PMLA court to issue a non-bailable warrant against Mehul Choksi. Choksi has not appeared before the ED on previous occasions when summoned for questioning. And aviation fuel prices have been on the rise for the past few months, March being no exception, and this can't be good news for aviation companies. Soumit Sarkar tells us exactly how much it is going up by and how it could impact airline companies for the fourth quarter earnings.
So if you see, fuel prices have been hiked for the 8th consecutive month by Indian Oil Corporation, and in the March month it has been hiked by just 0.54%. So if you see the quantum of hike, it's the slowest in the last 8 months, but it's still a hike, and this is the 8th consecutive month where they have hiked the ATF prices. Now ATF prices will be around 63,162 rupees per kiloliter on an average in India for the month of March. Now if you see, fuel cost accounts for nearly 1/3 of the total cost for an airline company, so definitely there will be some impact on the profitability of the airline companies. And if you see, for the quarter ending March, that is the 4th quarter of financial year 2018, the prices have been hiked by 11.5%. Now these are the average prices for the month of January, February and March. So if we see the average prices, that they have increased by 11.5%, and on an average the prices are around 61,772 rupees per kiloliter for the 4th quarter of financial year 2018, and this is 11.5% hike is a significant hike, and the price of 61,772 is the highest average quarterly fuel prices seen in the last 3 years, and this is according to the data compiled by Bloomberg Quint. So we'll have to wait and watch now how the cost side of the airline companies impact, but there has been a hike in the month of March also.
Brace up for some scorching summer. Thus, the meteorological department has put out a warning today in predicting that the average temperature across the country will be higher by at least 1 degree. We caught up with the head of climate prediction at the IMD, DS Pai, to understand which parts of the country will be affected the worst. Listen in.
As per the forecast, we are expecting all the solutions from the country to experience above normal temperatures during these 3 months, that is average temperature, and particularly subdivisions from northwest India and the neighboring area. These are the generally we get the heat wave conditions during this period. They are expected to experience more than 1 degree abnormal temperature.
The leader of the opposition in Lok Sabha and senior Congress leader Mallikarjun Kharge has declined the government's offer to attend the meeting of the selection committee for Lokpal appointment. In a letter to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Kharge said that he took the decision only because he had been invited as a special invitee. And Kharge said that the invitation, being a special invitee, was part of an effort to exclude the voice of the opposition in the selection of the Lokpal. Listen in.
हम ये सवाल उठाना ज़रूरी है, जब वहाँ मैं जाके बैठूंगा, मैं एक स्पेशल इनवाइटी के नाते मेरे को अलग बिठाया जाएगा और वो लोग बैठेंगे और वो निर्णय करेंगे। जो निर्णय करेंगे उनका तो रिकॉर्ड हो जाएगा, उनका तो ये भी कहेंगे, अगर कोई वोटिंग का संभावना भी अगर आ गया तो मेरा कोई वोट भी काउंट नहीं होगा।
मतलब डिसेंट भी नहीं आपका जाएगा?
नहीं, वोट भी काउंट नहीं होगा। इसका मतलब यही है कि हमारे व्यूज को कोई वहाँ पर वैल्यू नहीं है।
And the CBI produced Karti Chidambaram before a Delhi court today, seeking extension of his custody by 14 days. Karti was arrested yesterday at Chennai airport on his return from the United Kingdom in connection with the alleged irregularities in the FIBPB clearance to the INX media and for receiving overseas funds to the tune of 305 crores in 2007. Meanwhile, a Delhi court has reserved its order on the bail plea of Karti Chidambaram's chartered accountant Bhaskaraman to March 7, and he will remain in jail till the 7th of March. And 2 Pakistani soldiers were killed in a retaliatory fire in Indian Army by Indian Army in Bhimbar Gully area of Jammu and Kashmir today. The Army was responding to a ceasefire violation by Pakistan. In a statement, the Army said that the Pakistan Army initiated unprovoked and indiscriminate firing of small arms, to which India retaliated. Pakistan has confirmed the casualties and identified deceased soldiers. And Hope Hicks, one of US President Donald Trump's longest-serving and most trusted aides, has resigned from her job as White House Communications Director, which comes as a blow to Trump, whose inner circle has been depleted by firings and clouded by scandal. The White House announced Hicks was leaving a day after she spent 9 hours in a closed hearing on the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee on its investigation into the Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. And White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders said Hicks' decision to leave was not related to her appearance before the panel. Trump called her a truly great person whom he could miss, or he would miss, at his side. And Bloomberg reports that the US President Donald Trump is set to announce steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports later this year and later today. And Trump is set to be in favor of setting up tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum from all countries. And the US move may provoke retaliation from China, the world's biggest steel and aluminum producer. How will this impact the US-China ties? Mallikarjun sums up this in this report.
I think there's certainly some risk of it, but the timing of this announcement, the expected announcement today, is quite curious because we have Liu He, the top Chinese economic advisor to President Xi, actually in Washington at the moment, and he's there to defuse these trade tensions, and there's an expectation that he might even make some concessions to try and calm things down. But nonetheless, as you say, China has already made clear they can retaliate, and they've already launched an investigation into some imports of agricultural produce, and there's a feeling that if tensions were to worsen from here, not necessarily just because of the steel move, but they certainly could retaliate in other sectors and cause pain to the US as well. So we're not yet at a trade war, but certainly tensions do seem to be increasing, there's no doubt.
And China's President Xi Jinping is all set to make his rule permanent. In a 2-week session starting Monday, China's parliament is expected to enact sweeping legislative changes to allow Xi to rule indefinitely. The agenda includes repealing presidential term limits, creating a powerful new agency to police officials, and possibly approving the biggest regulatory overhaul in 15 years. Xi is also planning to install allies in the key government posts, including the vice presidency and the central bank governorship and dozens of ministerial level positions. It's unclear when exactly specific decisions will be announced. And with that, it's a wrap on this show, but there's lots more lined up through the day. Thanks for watching and stay tuned in to Bloomberg Quint.
बढ़ो 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 मेरे संग